What's up YouTube? As I said, I'm back today with part 2 of our previous video, once again showing you why the author needs to break the plan to save the story. Sorry for the very late upload. I was making my video and for some reason my software started acting up a bit, leading me to believe there was a rendering issue. Fortunately, it wasn't too hard to get past. I'm still new to all this YouTube stuff, so please bear with me. Now that being said, if you haven't checked out the previous video to see the first 2 reasons why the author needs to break the plan to save the story, be sure to do so, because those 2 reasons are important as well. But without further ado, let's get back into our little discussion. Reason number 3. The characters are being forced out of character or made to act stupidly to achieve a certain outcome. The big problem with this is that every time it's done, the audience knows the character well enough to know that in this situation, they've acted either out of character or like a total moron, or possibly both. This most often manifests itself in plot armor for one character when another character, usually a villain, has bested them. As it relates to Merlin, how many times did Morgana have someone in captivity and choose to use them in some strange way instead of killing them?
You know, there's one thing I don't understand, Merlin. You're Arthur's servant, nothing more. Yet, time and again, you proved yourself willing to lay down your life for him. Your hands are cold.
What? Kill these people! This also manifests itself in the villain leaving the protagonist to die a slow, cruel death, and not tying up loose ends. What? Kill this man! Smallville also had moments where things like this happen, and they were just as unbelievable there. Do I even need to really mention how many times Clark was weakened by kryptonite and not killed for whatever reason? Yeah, both shows had their moments.
Very good.
Now, one way to counter this is to have valid reasons why the villain cannot or will not harm your protagonist. Consider Nimue telling Arthur,
"It's not your destiny to die at my hand."
I see this and am a little taken aback. Then I nod in approval. In a show where destiny and fate are thrown around more than Medea's grit balls, I fully accept this answer. That doesn't explain why Nimue tried to kill him in the first place, but it's completely logical to think that she perhaps only wanted to delay Arthur so he wouldn't be able to save Merlin, who was at that point dying from poison. This also provides setup for the future by hinting at the fact that Arthur has a destiny that is pretty grim hanging over him. And this premises makes it so that as viewers we can now ask all kinds of questions. When is Arthur's death supposed to happen? Who's supposed to do it? Is it escapable? Will we reach this point in the Merlin series or only have it hinted at as Arthur and Merlin go on into greatness? Will we finish the series with Arthur somehow having escaped it? And the questions are endless. Very good line by Nimue here. Does so many things all at once and ties into the themes of the series perfectly. Smallville also tried to do this by having Zod not kill Clark in the alternate reality where the Kandorians were ruling because he wanted Clark to join them as a brother to bridge the gap between alien and human. I can accept something like this happening as well, though perhaps my acceptance here is not so deeply rooted as it was in Merlin's answer. Another good example of a movie that did this very well is the absolutely S-tier movie that we've already pulled from, The Incredibles. And this movie possibly features the best maneuvering done in this category. This movie gave Syndrome, the villain, so much more power than our protagonist, Mr. Incredible. But Syndrome doesn't immediately kill Mr. Incredible because he has to monologue first, because this conflict is personal.
All I wanted was to help you.
I only wanted to help. And what did you say to me?
Fly home, buddy. I work alone.
So Mr. Incredible almost gets away, but doesn't. And said villain goes on such a power trip after outsmarting Mr. Incredible's escape plan that he loses his advantage by accidentally flinging Mr. Incredible out of the range of his powers. Now, as Mr. Incredible escapes, said villain tries to kill him and thinks he does, but hasn't really. This is why Mr. Incredible survives this encounter. And think about this. If it weren't for this case, he'd be dead. This is beautiful. This is writing at its best. This is S tier. Also note that the next time Mr. Incredible and Syndrome cross paths, Syndrome doesn't kill him, Not only because he is now enjoying the battle of wits going on between him and Mr. Incredible, but also because he wants to know,
Who did you contact?
as his operation is now in jeopardy. Note that this is also why the Batman and Joker dynamic works so well. Batman won't kill Joker because of his moral standards, and Joker won't kill Batman because he doesn't want to kill Batman.
I don't want to kill you. What would I do without you? Go back to
The Joker sees the never-ending struggle between him and the Batman as fun, and would never want it to end. And very interesting things can happen when your antagonist won't attack your protagonist for whatever reason, but shares no such sentiment for those your protagonist cares about. Look at these scenes to see what I mean.
Do it!
That's not funny.
Come on, let's go meet the folks.
I gave my word I would not come for the girl. Your death, however, is long overdue, Superman.
Interesting indeed. And to cover another side of this, here's another example from Merlin of this same thing happening, but in a scenario where the goal of plot armor removal and forced plot direction is much more apparent. In the scene I'm about to show, you will see that Merlin is not only forced to act out of character, but pushed to the point of acting like an unskilled moron. Now the scene I'm talking about is at the end of the series when Merlin arrives at the final battle at Camland to help Arthur and the other knights once again in this final battle with Mordred and Morgana. With a variety of powers at his disposal, and now basically actualized as full-on legendary Merlin, compared to Clark at the end of Smallville if you missed this, Merlin strikes at Morgana and her troops, commands a dragon away, then ends with the final strike of power to cement his presence. And this is good. But then, he makes a very bad decision. He leaves the place where he was standing and controlling the fight from, and starts descending the mountain. Now Arthur could see him when he was up there, and it's not hard to imagine he could see Arthur too, since Arthur was not only clearly visible, but yelled a battle cry after Merlin had arrived. If you want more evidence, consider the fact that Merlin saved Arthur from being attacked by a group of men just in the nick of time. So why did Merlin leave this absolutely amazing spot where he had full control of the fight? Especially when he was aware that Arthur was supposed to die according to prophecy at this very battle. Wouldn't it have been a wiser choice to stay up high on the mountain to keep an eye on Arthur?
It's over, Anakin! I have the high ground!
Yes, it would have. And all Merlin would have to do is make sure that every time someone even tries to get close to Arthur... Sadly, Merlin didn't do this, which is why this happened. And then we, the audience, are given this scene with Merlin and Arthur later on.
I defeated the Saxons. Dragon. And yet I knew it was Mordred that I must stop.
Yet we, the audience, know that this is out of line with Merlin's intelligence and skill level throughout the show. Just look at how skilled Merlin has proved himself to be in watching Arthur's back.
What actually happened? The usual. I saved your neck.
In this scene, he is even standing on a mountain the same as before, though under vastly different circumstances. And he is defending Arthur like a beast. So all this to say that when Merlin says this to Arthur,
And yet I knew it was Mordred that I must stop.
I say, don't worry, Merlin. You actually aren't this dumb and unaware and unskilled at protecting Arthur. The writers just needed to remove Arthur's plot armor, buddy. Oh, and by the way, that's also why you didn't call the dragon earlier and just fly to the lake instead of trying to make it on horseback first. Yeah, Arthur's hand, active and very annoying to see. And before I move on, one last time because it's just too good.
Merlin.
Reason number 4. The preconceived ending is not adjusting to the reality of the story. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, let's look at a completely different series to show this a bit better. And that series is Naruto. And to zero in on how this point applies, let's look at Naruto and Sasuke's final battle at the Valley of the End. Now, for those who are unaware, this was the climactic battle at the end of the series where Naruto and Sasuke duked it out at full power to decide whose ideas would prevail in the world. Naruto stood for the idea of pushing peace and redemption and bringing about resolution of conflict through mutual understanding. Sasuke stood for creating peace through force and callousness and the cutting off of all emotional ties that could create weakness. And by weakness, I mean that his cutting off of emotional ties was to ensure nothing could remove strength from the first two factors I mentioned. Now, this was a great fight and exactly what the fans wanted. But I want to make an argument here, and it's not about the ending itself per se. Rather, my point is about realizing how the ending you have in mind fits into your story. And not only your story as it is, but your story as it is developing. You see, my point is this. Sometimes when writing a story, you have a number of ideas about where things are going. And your story's ending may be one of those strong ideas. But the problem is that sometimes your story takes a mind of its own, and you have to realize that the ending or plot thread originally intended no longer fits. This does not mean that the ending in mind is bad. It can actually be very great, but it might not be optimal for how the story is developing. When you notice this happening, you have to do one of two things. You have to either find a way to bring the story back to the original ending, or you have to change the ending and story threads accordingly. Now, sometimes the story has taken such a radically different turn that the originally intended ending would best be completely abandoned. Why? Because a new ending that better fits the current changes to the story would be better. There are other times, however, where the original ending or plot thread can merely be modified or changed to fit the new changes in the story. Now, how does this relate to Naruto and the ending I mentioned? Well, Kishimoto clearly said at one point that this ending with Naruto and Sasuke was always in his mind as how things would end. And with how it turned out, let's be honest, it was pretty nice. But what if Naruto had failed more times along the way? Let's run this little thought experiment to discover the deeper truth. Consider this. What if there had been 3 major fights leading up to Naruto and Sasuke's final fight instead of a bunch of tiny skirmishes here and there? What if the Valley of the End fight was simply the very last in a string of heated confrontations where the final result of this struggle to bring back Sasuke would be decided? Let's think about how this would have affected the story. Well, first of all, Sasuke's return would have felt more real, because the greater battles in between would have shown that there was more of a struggle to retrieving him. Naruto would not simply have talk no jutsu'd him into submission, but rather would have struggled with him multiple times over a long stretch of encounters leading up to this final battle. Also, fans would not feel like they had to wait 500 episodes, with filler, to see the battle they wanted to see. As an example, if more major fights had been littered throughout the series, we could have had a Team 7 vs Sasuke fight near the beginning, a Naruto vs Sasuke fight near the middle, a Team 7 vs Team Taka fight near the end, and the little skirmishes mingled in between. Then, you make Naruto and Sasuke duke it out at the end with everything they've gathered throughout the series, and this is the decisive battle. So do you see what I'm saying here? By being rigid with this ending, or not realizing that the distance between the ending and the beginning was a problem, Kishimoto missed many opportunities along the way to bring Sasuke and Naruto / Team 7 into deeper, more meaningful conflict that would have taken the overall story to another level. And note that when opportunities like this are missed, a whole slew of other opportunities are missed along the way, usually for other characters. As an example, we can assume that if Naruto and Sasuke had more major fights between the beginning of Shippuden and the end, Sakura and Kakashi would be present in them. And from that reality, a whole slew of other questions starts to present itself. For example, how does this constant failure to bring Sasuke back affect Kakashi, as it is his young team of Genin that is imploded? How would Naruto feel through all this? He was already torturing himself mentally throughout the series because of his failure at the end of part 1. How much more would he torture himself if he had failed numerous times in his relentless pursuit of bringing Sasuke home? And what about Sakura, who made Naruto promise to bring Sasuke back and has to constantly watch Naruto fail in their major battles? At this point, she would feel even more the weight of having forced such a heavy promise onto a friend, because the promise would now be taking a much greater toll on him. She already felt that how she burdened him was a problem to the point where she tried to stop him from going after Sasuke any longer. How much more would she feel that sentiment if things were much, much worse? The answers to these questions change relationship dynamics, character arcs, and so many other things in your story, and the changes are usually for the better. So when you're planning a story and have an ending in mind for it, don't assume the ending has to stay rigidly the same. As you actually start to write your story, take a moment to think about it and ask yourself, with how my story is developing, does my preconceived ending still fit well? If so, great! Try to think about ways to improve it even more and make it even more awesome. But if the answer is that you're not so sure about your ending anymore, or you feel like it's breaking the character of one of your characters, you may have some work to do. Now there are a whole laundry list of other reasons why the author should break the plan, but I decided to cover some of the most notable ones here. Other relevant topics would be things like character arcs and the like. I feel like character arcs are such a broad subject that they should have their own video though, so I've tabled that for now. In any case, I hope you all enjoyed this video and found it informative and eye-opening in all the right ways. Once again, like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. And as usual, keep writing awesome.